where we discuss the possibilities.
Hey guys, I'm Joe Klemczewski, founder of the Diet Doc, here for the Life Mastery Podcast with none other than Paul Revelia, the hottest coach in the world right now. So you guys all know him. I don't need to introduce him, but Paul, welcome. Thank you for being in our coaching clinic. We do 5 different segments of our podcast weekly. And in the coaching clinic, we like to talk to a consultant, nutrition consultant, coach, and just get their feel for their process, let everybody see exactly who they are and what they do. So thanks for being a part.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's an honor to do anything with you. You know that.
So what is it like being the #1 guy in the world right now?
Well, I don't think I'm there yet, but it's funny you say that because earlier this year, I think was the first time that maybe late last year when I started to actually feel like, I think early on in coaching, I had a lot of doubts. I questioned myself a lot. I had that feeling like I didn't deserve to be coaching athletes that were so good. But late last year, like a flip switch, and I said, screw that. My goal is now to be the #1 coach in the world. And I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know what it means, but it's really shaped my thinking and decision-making over the last year. So it's been exciting because the biggest difference has been just the caliber of inquiries that I get, of being a part of a group of athletes. It's almost like a secret clique that once you're in with the popular kids, now everybody wants to talk to you. So, I think a lot of that has to do with you because I had a few clients I was struggling to peak last year, and I reached out to you, and, lo and behold, we had some world champions, national titles and stuff. So I think probably the best thing about me is that I always look to learn more, and I never act like I know everything, and I'm always willing to kind of be open-minded about stuff. And that's allowed me to, the things I do now are way different than I did even 2-3 years ago. So that's been the fun for me, is that I've actually gotten better and changed.
And to that point, I was just in Italy and had 2 solid days of lectures, and I've never talked about performance peaking in a 3-hour block. I mean, usually it's 45 to 60 minutes, but I told the audience the same thing. I've been doing this for 20 years, and just in the last couple of years, I have made some changes to my approach that are way better. I almost feel like I have to apologize.
Yeah.
I know I had 150, world champion pro, titles, almost 500 pro cards and all that. But there was always a way to lose that. I still had clients who might not quite get there. They might not peak exactly how I want. I would always say, I know I can get 95% of the way there. I want to get 100% of the way there. But if somebody was just a little off, I still felt terrible. Even with all that success, I just felt terrible. And I think I've hit on something that makes it almost foolproof. You and I talked about this last year, and you're using it and working on some refinements. So yeah, I definitely want to talk about that. But let's first describe when we say coaching. Ironically, right before you and I were recording this podcast, I talked to a friend of mine I've known for 20 years. And I said, 10 years ago, when I decided, I don't want to do coaching forever, so I want to move into some other pursuits with our company, the Diet Doc. It wasn't what it is now. You and I have talked about how now there are thousands and thousands of coaches, and it's simply an online nutrition consultant that somebody says, I want to hire you to, anything from just get me ready for my wedding to just lose some weight for a photo shoot or just lose weight, period. But a vast majority are still doing some kind of physique sport. So competing in bodybuilding, bikini competition, that kind of thing. And so before we get into the the progressive linear load that we're talking about for that final process, talk a little bit more about what it's like for a client to come on board with you as a coach. What's that onboarding process? What are your expectations? How do you get them to that final point?
Well, it's funny you mentioned the progression, because I'll say, when I first started 7 or 8 years ago, it was simply, I would get an email, usually a referral from someone like Lane Norton, saying, hey, I hear you're a coach. Lane's full. Can you help me? I'd say, sure. Here's a questionnaire. Here's my prices. They'd say, take my money. I'd look at their questionnaire. I'd send them a plan. And that was it. That was my process early on, because that was my experience when I first started working with Lane. Like, I thought that's what the process was. My process now is much different. I have someone who reviews all of my inquiries, just because it became a burden and I couldn't trust myself. I felt obligated oftentimes to work with someone because they really, really wanted to work with me. And so I had to step away from that process. I also now have a 30-minute phone call with every potential client that I'm going to work with, because I want to remove any doubt about what I'm offering them, what they're willing to do for me, and what our vision and goals are going to be. And it's changed my enjoyment of this profession like 1,000-fold. I felt like a fraud as a coach early on. I didn't understand how I was making so much money doing so little. Now I literally wake up, run into my computer, and can't wait to get my updates and talk to my clients. I text them, I call them. I've set up a block of hours per week where I set up just for phone calls, that any one of my clients can click on a button and go schedule a call with me, right? So I just feel like there's this much different level of interaction where I'm actually a coach now. I'm not just the guy on the internet sending you macros and a workout. I'm actually, it's funny. There's a new trend now of life coaches, and I use the quote life coaches because they're usually 22-year-olds. But I feel like I'm not just like, here's your macros and here's your plan. I'm like, okay, what's your day look like? Let's figure out a plan where we can schedule how to best fit your goals into your life. You have kids, you have a job. Can we work at this time? And so I've become a bit of a overall practitioner, because I feel like I'm good at solving problems for myself. I myself have a busy life, and I still try to find time to be an athlete. And I find that experience helps me be a better coach as well.
Certainly. Awesome. And man, Corey's going to love seeing this interview, just on that connection element, the fact that you're doing that. We talk with our program owners all the time of doing that. At the end of last year, I tried to get all of our program owners to institute more of a texting platform for immediate responses instead of emails and being so formal, mainly because it's just people communicate in different ways now. Sure. And the rapidity or the easier access just, does create a better connection point. So yeah, my hat is off to you for recognizing that and being more of a human instead of just a coach.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way around it. If I'm going to be the best coach in the world, the only way to do that is for my clients to literally be singing my praises, love me. And not to say that I don't make mistakes or I'm not going to be flawed, but when I can tell my client, like, I think we could have done this better, I feel like that honesty allows us to have open communication. And it's allowed me to just, if anything, like, I sleep better. I'm more excited about my job. Like, I feel like I actually have a finger on the pulse of what's going on in their lives. I'm not just, like I said, some auto respond email that they're going to get, add some carbs and take away some cardio or whatever.
Right. So you mentioned improving or doing better for a client. It's funny you mentioned that, because in my discussion on peaking in Italy, I got my PowerPoint presentation down to my final slides, which was my most current world champion, Candace Hatch from last year, the WNBF Worlds.
I remember her, yeah.
And as I show, here's somebody who, after 17 years of not competing, she's in her mid-40s, mother of 3. She comes back and, we win this world title among, unbelievable competition. And I, as I'm showing the pictures, and I said, you know what? She still could have been a little better. Like, I wasn't happy that she could have been a little bit fuller. Now that we've worked together, we've got some rapport. Here's what I'm going to do, because we're going to repeat this year. So I love that you're that meticulous as well. Like, even when you win something that big, it's like, well, that was good, but there's just that much more. So we've talked about the progressive linear load, because whether you front load, back load, and I'll explain this a little bit for the listeners, to me, there are some advantages or pros, but to every method you use that creates some kind of homeostatic pressure, you're building a carb load up to where you're going to have some either spillover or potentially not get far enough, and you have to pull back. And there's always some dynamic tension in your body trying to respond to what you're doing. And there's still an element of, if you don't nail it perfectly, it's going to be noticeable. And
Right.
so I have been trying to find a way to eliminate all risk whatsoever. So in the beginning, everybody from probably the 1950s would do kind of a backload. So you would deplete at the beginning of the week. You'd have 0 carbs. You'd train your ass off. And then you would load up carbs at the end of the week and start resting. And the goal was the super compensation effect, to be really, really full. But you could spill over and not remedy that in time and look a little spongy. Or, it's very common to have that high load and then you taper back just to make sure you're not spilled over. But now you're retracting carbs, so you could still be a little spilled over and start losing some muscle volume. So now you're flatter and softer. And I've missed like that before. So I started 15 or 20 years ago doing kind of a front load where I would not deplete. I would try and reach that glycogen ceiling early in the week, 7, 6, 5 days prior. Then I would taper back, and then I would almost try and fill back up at the end. So it was a moderate front load and then kind of a taper and an up. So it's almost like an undulating load.
And you use the front load as a means to go, okay, that was enough or not enough, right? Like it was almost like a test.
It was kind of gauging, trying to get to that ceiling. But again, you're still not, there's still that chance of being too flat or too full. Again, it worked well enough for me for 15 years to have the success I did with clients. So that at least was an improvement. But I started doing something where even pulling back on that front load, just to not be quite as high, I wanted to just build gradually through the week to find that ceiling and then hold it. So I'll give you an example. I have a client who won a show last year, won a couple classes, last week. And so this is how it went. I started out with his carbs, I think at 200 grams. Protein and fat was the same virtually all week. But I started at 200 grams over the weekend. Then by Monday, I had taken it up to like 225 for a day or two, then 250 for a day or two, 275, and then 300. So very progressive. And what I'm watching for is I was watching his body weight, and he starts out here, and then he starts losing a little bit of body weight, and he's getting tighter. So I can see him, getting a little bit flatter, sharper, which is fine. That's why I'm pushing carbs up, because I don't want to get too flat, beyond being able to fill back up. It takes 24 to 48 hours to really fully assimilate glycogen in muscle tissue. So you can't just throw a ton of carbs in on contest morning and expect them to fill up. You've got to reach that glycogen ceiling Thursday and Friday. And if you can do that, so by watching his weight, watching his photos, fine-tuning daily where we've got those carbs, I might not have taken him quite as high. We could have plateaued a little bit. I might have had to spike him even higher. But I have to reach that glycogen ceiling Thursday or Friday, hold it, make sure he's still very, very sharp, and then literally like just watering a flower, or a plant, you keep hydration and sodium where it should be on contest day, and they will just fill out, maintain all of that tightness, and you don't have to risk anything. So we talked about this with a couple of your clients last year. Tell me what your experience was trying that for the first time.
The first thought I had was, because we talked about a few variables, but it's, I think a lot of people will look at like the carbs as being the biggest variable, but the peaking process being so dynamic, the one thing I really tried to impart on my clients was eat the same exact foods every day, so that we're not dealing with any changes in digestive rate. And the nice thing about the linear load that I noticed was when I would have someone do a front load and look really good on Tuesday or Wednesday, when I would go to do that again on Friday, it wouldn't be enough, because we had kind of spiked some hormonal changes and the metabolism had sped up. And so we still it's almost like didn't peak enough. And so the advantage that I saw with this approach was, and the caveat being, you have to be shredded. This is not a person that's, a few pounds over stage weight. This is someone who is just dialed in. And I feel like as the metabolism speeds up a little bit during the week, you're filling out a little bit better. Some inflammation comes down because we're not training as hard. And like you said, it's literally like just filling up the balloon every single day, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then by Thursday and Friday, they just have that grainy look to them, almost like their skin is gone, their muscle fibers are moving every time that they move. The scale kind of, I like what you said, I like looking for that scale to drop a little bit because that tells me things are really moving in the right direction. But even if it's stable and we've added carbs all week, then I'm really happy with that, especially if I see some more detail. So yeah, the clients that I had the most trouble with were the ones that had the most unpredictable digestion rates, ones that I had to be very, very careful with, like with Ray Clark, who is a 205-pound world champion now. We're talking about starting out the week at 90 carbs and ending at like 200, which sounds crazy. Most people would be like, oh, that guy needs 500 or 600 grams of carbs a day before the show. We did that. He was a water buffalo the day of the show. Right. In the past. Luckily he's one of those guys, he can get away with looking like a water buffalo and still placing it at the top of a pro show. But when he nails it, he's in the category of, he can stand next to Doug Miller, he can stand next to Marshall Johnson, those guys. So yeah, it's been awesome. And I've used it across the board, even with bikini competitors, because as the bikini division has changed in the NPC and the IFBB, those girls are coming in as lean as natural bodybuilders, as crazy as that sounds.
Every division does that. Every time they bring a new division out, the best physiques are tough to discount. It's hard to say, well, you were too lean. In other words, you look too good. So it just doesn't work. But, I know when we discussed this about Ray, you had shown me photos of him from previous shows. And again, it was very hard to predict. And even somebody with all of that potential, as I'm saying, and this is a hard sell, right? Because everybody wants something very exotic, something novel and sexy and magical. And just to say, no, we're taking out all risk. Like we're the Warren Buffett of peaking coaches. And we just want to make sure we can nail it 100% without doing anything crazy. It sounds almost too easy. And I have an IFBB client competing overseas, and again, this is something very foreign to a lot of people. And so to describe it and sell it, it's difficult. And, I've spent 20 years trying just to get people to not dehydrate and to not view sodium as their enemy. So I know this is going to be equally challenging to get people to try and understand. But I do know in Italy, my test crowd of 250 people, they were fascinated by it because they saw all these visual representations of clients who had missed peaks, try to front load, try to back load, and now here with this progressive linear load, just how you said they can achieve this grainy, nasty tightness and at the same time be as full as possible, have that combination without all of the risk.
Well, there's another huge benefit to peaking this way. You feel absolutely amazing. Most of the people on the day before the show are dehydrated. They're exhausted from doing these crazy workouts and diuretics. And so my clients are backstage babbling up a storm, talking to each other, eating and drinking, while people are literally like haven't had a drink for 2 days. They're suffering. And they're like, why are these people having fun? Why are they enjoying this part of the process? And then they're winning. Because you and I both know we could write whatever plan we want, but if we're not getting results, no one's going to buy into it. So I think that's been the real change over the last couple of years, is that I'm getting the results. So people that might look at this and go, there's not enough complication in here. When do I add the diuretic? When do I sit in the sauna? Wait, I'm still training on Friday. Why am I doing cardio the morning of the show? They might look at that and question me, but they go, you know what? This guy is getting it done. I have to do this. And so, I'll even have people on my team page be like, Coach Paul has me doing this on show day, and 20 people will chime in, just shut up and do it. It works. So yeah, I think, and actually I've had some clients, now I don't want to use this term loosely, but I use it to describe like when you've peaked improperly before, like a PTSD client, like they actually have trauma from their previous prep styles that they feel the guilt of not feeling like crap on peak week or drinking something. But, if you got to, massage those clients and be able to deal with them. And that's part of coaching. I am a coach. So,
yeah, going hand in hand with feeling better through peak week, This again goes back probably 12 or 15 years when I wrote a series for a bodybuilding magazine where I described the phases that I conceptualize in dieting. And the fourth phase out of 5 is what I called metabolic building. Other people came after that and tried to rename that reverse dieting. But for me, a reverse diet happens before the show. Because like in Candace's case, 4 to 6 weeks before winning the world title, her hardest dieting, she was around 125 grams of carbs a day. Good amount of protein and fat, but 125. During peak week, she was up to 350 and 400 grams of carbs a day. I had to raise her protein from about 140 to 160. Her fat went from about 35-ish to about 65. And so all of that metabolic building, like you said, when you can create a tight upward spiral of metabolic activity, because you're so incrementally increasing food a little bit at a time that the metabolism speeds up. And then that means you're training a little harder in the gym. So that means you might be recovering a little lean body mass, which is metabolically active tissue. So it's just like shoveling coal into a furnace.
Yeah.
These people are getting fuller and fuller and fuller, becoming less resistant to carbs. They're not as insulin sensitive, so they're not going to have the risk of spilling over, looking soft, between meals. And yet, like you said, their weight is still actually coming down. They're still getting tighter. Their skin folds are going down. So if you couple that, meaning that you've been ready for the show a month before the show, to the point where now you've escalated your food intake to maintenance levels of calories, then you enter a progressive linear load of peaking, you cannot have a better scenario of getting the best of both worlds of tightness, metabolic activity, lower insulin resistance, and being as full and energetic as you can be. I mean, that's how I have been able to take clients who may never have been able to even win a pro card, and now they're winning pro shows.
Right.
It's the margins are that tight at the top of this industry, and these details matter.
Well, I'll be honest. I feel when I go to these NPC and IFBB pro shows, I'm going to a knife fight with a gun. I literally know that my people are going to be looking and feeling their best on stage when everyone else is suffering. And, especially with some of these 2-day national shows, I just know my girls that are coming back to finals, they're coming for overalls, not just coming for class placings, because they're going to be coming in looking better and harder every single day. And it's playing itself out, and it's going to be a changing of the guard at the top of the sport over the next couple of years. It's taken a long time. It started with you, and I feel like natural bodybuilding adopted it early on. Even when I first started competing in natural bodybuilding, if someone was like cutting water, people would be like, "What are you doing?" But still within the NPC and the IFBB, that's all you hear about is the water cutting protocols, and everyone gets a copy of someone else's peak week plan. But I think, we're starting to chip away at that, and the proof's just going to be in the pudding. It's just going to have to, consistently see the people placing and doing well that are using these practices. And, people are going to start to question why the hell they're suffering so much for so little.
So I want to end our time like this in the coaching clinic. In Italy, the very first souvenir I bought was, I think it was Da Vinci, has a quote that says, "I am still learning." And he said that at 87 years old. Or maybe it was Michelangelo. I think it was Da Vinci. But anyway, that was what you opened up with 20 minutes ago. You said, "You know what, man? I want to become the best coach in the world for my clients. And that's not going to happen if I'm closed-minded. I want to learn more. I want to do more." And then 20 minutes later, you said, "I have to make sure I'm massaging my clients, helping them through these barriers, helping them learn." So what a great theme for Paul Revelia, who I think already is the #1 coach in the world, because you're such a genuine guy who cares. You're creating those new connection points. So again, my hat is off to you, friend. And I look forward to working with you in the future. I appreciate you inviting me to your camps over the last couple of years. And you're a great coach because you're a great guy.
More to come. And, I value very much our friendship, and I know I've been a little behind on some projects that we've been working on. So I appreciate your patience. But yeah, there's no stopping in me. I feel like almost a newfound sense of purpose at 40. You know, with this goal of coaching and learning, and it's exciting. Just it's going to be a fun decade.
Awesome. Well, guys, that's what it takes. If you want to be the best in your industry, if you want to break into the coaching world, anything in life, I'm telling you what, you're going to need the skills that Paul displays in full regard, which is going to be just being hungry, passionate, but more than anything, willing to learn, willing to collaborate with other people, and just keep moving the ball forward as a group of people. So thanks for watching. And Paul, again, thanks to you for being in the coaching clinic with us today.
Always an honor. Thank you guys for listening.